The blast door buckled inward with a screech of tortured metal. Captain Marcus Chin didn't flinch. His rifle remained steady, aimed at the gap where clawed fingers pried at the reinforced steel. Behind him, Princess Valira of the Ethorian Empire pressed herself against the far wall of the bunker, her crystalline skin flickering with colors he'd learned meant fear. "They'll breach in 30 seconds, Marcus said. His voice was level, tactical. "When they do, stay behind the crates. Don't move until I say. You can't hold them." Valira's words came out in perfect galactic standard, though her translator struggled with the emotion. "There are hundreds. I've counted 243 distinct heat signatures." Marcus checked his ammunition counter. 48 rounds. He'd face worse odds. Not by much, but he'd face them. "Ma'am, I need you to trust me." The door exploded inward. The first Krell warrior threw was 8 feet of scaled muscle and killing instinct. Marcus put 2 rounds through its throat before it finished its war cry. The second took 3 shots. Center mass, head. They kept coming. He moved like water between the fallen, each step calculated, each shot placed with surgical precision. The Krell were shock troops, bred for overwhelming force. They expected fear. They expected chaos. Marcus gave them neither. 12 seconds. 19 bodies. His rifle clicked empty. He dropped it, drawing his sidearm with his right hand while his left unclipped a concussion grenade. The throw was underhand, gentle almost, bouncing it off the door frame into the corridor beyond. The blast shook dust from the ceiling. In the ringing silence that followed, Marcus reloaded. His hands moved with the kind of economy that came from 10,000 repetitions in 100 gravity wells. The princess hadn't made a sound. Good. He needed her quiet if they were going to survive the next wave. But no wave came. Instead, a voice rang out in the corridor. Deep, resonant, speaking Old Krell. Marcus didn't understand the words, but he recognized a command when he heard one. The scattered Krell forces pulled back, their claws scraping against metal as they withdrew. "What did they say?" Marcus kept his weapon raised. Valira's colors shifted to something between purple and gold. "They said the Brood Queen wishes to see what manner of creature holds the daughter of Ethoria. That's not good." "No." Valira stepped forward, her fear colors deepening. "It means she's coming here herself." The temperature in the bunker dropped 5 degrees. Marcus felt it through his armor, saw his breath mist in the recycled air. Frost crept across the walls in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. She entered like winter given form. Queen Keseth was smaller than her warriors, barely 7 feet tall, but she filled the space with presence that made Marcus's combat instinct scream. Her scales were black as void, traced with veins of luminescent blue. When she looked at him, her eyes held an intelligence that felt older than his entire species. She spoke. The words bypassed Marcus's translator, resonating in his chest like a subsonic frequency. Valira translated, her voice small. "She asks why you have not run." Marcus lowered his weapon fractionally, not dropping it, but showing he understood this was negotiation now, not combat. "Where would I run that you couldn't follow?" Keseth's head tilted. She spoke again, and this time Marcus heard something that might have been amusement in the alien syllables. "She says you are the first human she has encountered," Valira continued. "She has heard of your kind. Soft worlds, soft bodies, soft minds. Yet you stand in a room of your own making's death and speak of philosophy. I speak of tactics." Marcus met the Brood Queen's gaze. "You wanted to see me. Here I am. But you already broke through our lines. You already have this sector. So why are we still breathing?" The silence stretched. Through the shattered doorway, Marcus could see dozens of Krell warriors, motionless, waiting. He'd killed 19 of them in 12 seconds, and they weren't attacking. Wasn't protocol. Wasn't their nature. Unless someone had commanded them to wait. Kesseth moved closer. Each step was deliberate, measured. She stopped 3 meters away, just outside Marcus's optimal engagement range for his sidearm, he noted. This one understood human weapons. She extended a clawed hand. In her palm lay something small and dark. It took Marcus a moment to recognize it as a piece of scorched metal, twisted beyond recognition except for one detail, the embossed seal of the Ethorian Medical Corps. Valira made a sound like breaking glass. "That's from the evacuation shuttle," the princess whispered. "The one carrying the refugee children. It was supposed to." Kesseth spoke. Her voice was different now. Softer, though no less commanding. "She says her kind does not make war on hatchlings." Valira translated, and now her colors showed confusion, maybe hope. "She says your kind does not either. She watched you, Captain Chen. Watched you pull 17 children from burning wreckage under fire. Watched you give your oxygen mask to the smallest one. She says this is not warrior behavior. Warriors take glory. You took burns." The blast door buckled inward with a screech of tortured metal that still echoed in Marcus's memory as he stood before an alien queen who held evidence of his actions like an accusation and a question wrapped into one. His training said calculate firing solutions. His instincts said this moment would determine if humanity lived or died in Kesseth's estimation. The small voice that had made him run into burning metal instead of away from it said something different entirely. It said maybe survival wasn't the only thing worth fighting for. Valira's hand found his shoulder, her touch light as frost, and he realized she was shaking. Not with fear this time. With something else. Something that didn't have a name in any language he knew but felt like the weight of 2 species holding their breath in a broken bunker while children somewhere waited to learn if hope was a strategy or just another way to die. Kesseth's eyes never left his face. Waiting. Judging. Deciding. The queen's claws closed around the twisted metal, her bioluminescent veins pulsing in a pattern Marcus couldn't read. When she spoke again, her voice carried harmonics that made his bones ache, and Valira's translation came in fragments, each word dropping like a stone into still water. "She says her clutch mothers sing of honor, of the old ways, when war had rules and enemies had respect. But the galaxy has grown cold. Species fight for resources, for territory, for the simple pleasure of dominance. She has seen civilizations burn their own young to deny them to enemies. Seen soldiers step over dying hatchlings to claim strategic positions." Valira paused, her colors cycling through patterns Marcus had never seen before. "She says you are an anomaly. A curiosity. And she wishes to understand what made you run toward fire, when even her own warriors would have calculated the loss as acceptable." Marcus's combat implant fed him data he didn't need. Heart rate elevated. Adrenaline levels still combat ready. 14 hostiles in visual range, 46 more in the corridor beyond, estimated 200 more within the compound. His sidearm had 17 rounds. The princess had no weapons, no armor, no combat training. They were surrounded by an enemy force that had already demonstrated the capacity to breach military-grade fortifications. None of that data mattered. "I don't know what you want me to say." Marcus kept his weapon lowered but ready. "I did what needed doing. The math was simple. 17 children against 1 soldier. 17 futures against 1 present. I made a call." Kesseth moved closer. The frost on the wall spread with her, creeping across the floor in crystalline patterns. She reached out with her free hand, and Marcus forced himself not to retreat as those claws came within inches of his face. She touched his helmet, tapping the scorched metal where plasma fire had slagged the outer layer. She spoke, and, this time Valira's voice cracked during translation. She says your armor tells a story. 47 distinct impact points. 16 thermal scores. 3 punctures sealed with emergency foam. You have been protecting things for a long time, Captain Shin. Your body remembers what your mind tries to calculate away. The Queen's hand moved to Marcus's chest, over his heart. Her claws rested there, not threatening, not gentle, just present. The cold seeped through his armor, through the impact-resistant weave, through skin and muscle until it felt like she was touching something deeper than flesh. She asks what you thought in that moment. When you saw the shuttle burning and knew the numbers said death. What was the thought that made you move? Marcus remembered. The screaming. The smoke. The way the shuttle's hull had cracked open like an egg, spilling children in pressure suits that were designed for controlled environments, not crash sites. He remembered the first one he'd reached, a Centauri girl no older than 6 by human standards, her suit leaking oxygen from a tear he'd sealed with his own emergency patch. Remembered the weight of her in his arms, light as hope, heavy as responsibility. I thought not today. The words came out rougher than he intended. I thought not on my watch. Not while I'm breathing. Keseth withdrew her hand. She turned to Valira, speaking in rapid Krell that the translator struggled to parse. The princess's colors went through a cascade Marcus had learned meant shock, then disbelief, then something that looked like cautious wonder. She's calling a ceasefire, Valira said. Not just here. Across the entire sector. She's ordering her brood to stand down. Why? The tactical part of Marcus's brain was screaming that this was a trick, a trap, some kind of psychological warfare designed to lower their guard before the real attack. But Keseth didn't answer him. She answered Valira, speaking in long, flowing phrases that the princess absorbed with growing intensity. When the queen finished, Valira stood silent for a long moment, her crystalline features reflecting the emergency lighting and patterns that looked almost like tears. She says the war began because we, the Thorian Empire, denied the Krell access to the crystalline nexus, a religious site sacred to her kind. We fortified it, militarized it, told her people their faith was worth less than our strategic position. She retaliated. We escalated. Thousands died on both sides. Valira's voice was barely above a whisper. But she says she watched you give your heir to a child who wasn't even your species. Watched you take burns for strangers. And she realized something. What? That if humans can value life that much, perhaps there's a way to end this that doesn't require one species to annihilate the other. The bunker felt suddenly smaller. The weight of what Keseth was proposing pressed down, like atmospheric pressure, during a hull breach. Marcus had spent 12 years in the service. Fought in 6 major campaigns. Lost friends to Krell ambushes and watched colonies burn under brood attacks. The idea that one moment, one choice, could matter enough to stop it all felt simultaneously too large and too fragile to believe. With respect, Your Majesty, Marcus said, directing his words to Keseth even though she'd need the translation. I'm just a captain. I don't have authority to negotiate peace. Keseth's laugh was like ice cracking. She spoke briefly, almost dismissively. She says you have something better than authority. Valira translated. You have proof that honor still exists. That protection of the weak isn't just propaganda. She will take that proof to her brood council. And I will take it to my father, the Emperor. The princess straightened, her colors shifting to something Marcus had never seen before, a deep, steady gold that seemed to glow from within. If you're willing to testify, to tell them what you did and why. Every tactical instinct Marcus possessed said this was a mistake. Said testimony meant exposure, meant putting himself in front of councils and courts that would dissect his actions looking for weakness or advantage. Said he should stick to his mission parameters, protect the principal, wait for extraction, let the people with metals and political power handle the big decisions. But he thought about 17 children. About a Centauri girl's face when she'd realized she could breathe again. About the way the smallest one, a human boy, no more than 4, had held onto Marcus's finger with both hands while medics worked on his broken leg, trusting completely that this armored stranger wouldn't let anything else hurt him. Not today. Not on my watch. I'll testify, Marcus said. Kessetha's bioluminescent veins pulsed brighter. She pressed her fist to her chest in what Marcus recognized from briefings as a Krell salute, the gesture their warriors used when acknowledging an equal. Then she turned and left, her warriors flowing around her like a tide reversing course. The Lyra slumped against the wall, her crystalline form actually shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. Do you understand what just happened? I stopped a war? Marcus's voice made it a question. You made a brood queen reconsider genocide. The Lyra's laugh was half sob. Captain Chen, my father has been negotiating with the Krell for 4 years. For years of diplomats and treaties and carefully worded proposals. And they've gotten nowhere because neither side believed the other was capable of genuine compassion. We thought they were monsters. They thought we were monsters. And then you... She gestured at the fallen Krell warriors, at the scorched walls, at the impossible scene they'd just survived. You showed both of us we were wrong. Marcus checked his weapon, more out of habit than need. His hands were steady. They always were after combat. It was later, in the quiet hours when the adrenaline faded, that the shaking came. I just did my job. No. The Lyra pushed off the wall, crossing to stand directly in front of him. At 7 feet tall, she had to look down slightly to meet his eyes. Your job was to protect me. The children weren't in your mission parameters. The shuttle wasn't your responsibility. You chose to care when caring wasn't profitable. When it wasn't even logical. Her colors shifted through patterns too complex to name. That's not training, Captain. That's character. And it might have just saved both our civilizations. The weight of that settled over Marcus like armor he couldn't remove. Somewhere in the compound, alarms were sounding. Command would be demanding status reports, trying to understand why the Krell assault had suddenly stopped. Soon there would be debriefings and questions and all the machinery of military bureaucracy grinding into motion. But right now, in this broken bunker, surrounded by evidence of violence and the absence of enemies who should still be attacking, Marcus Chen allowed himself one moment of honest emotion. Relief. Not because he'd survived, though that was part of it. Relief because 17 children were alive. Because a princess he'd sworn to protect was safe. Because maybe, just maybe, the endless cycle of retaliation and counter-retaliation might actually break. The sheer weight of exhaustion hit him like a kinetic strike, the adrenaline finally starting to ebb from his system. His burns throbbed under his armor, a reminder of fire and smoke and the desperate sprint across open ground while plasma bolts turned the air around him into superheated hell. We should move, Marcus said, forcing his body back into operational mode. Ceasefire or not, staying in a compromised position is tactically unsound. The Lyra nodded, but she didn't move immediately. Instead, she looked at the fallen Krell warriors, her colors taking on a somber blue-gray. They had names, families, clutchmates who will mourn them. Because I was foolish enough to insist on touring a forward position during an active conflict. You wanted to see your people, to let them see you. Marcus had read her file, knew her reputation as a princess who refused to leave from safety while her subjects fought and died. It was part of why Command had assigned him specifically to her protection. They needed someone who understood that kind of stubborn courage. That's not foolish. It's leadership. Leadership that got 19 Krell warriors killed. No, ma'am. War got them killed. Same war that's killed 30,000 Ethorians and gods know how many Krell. Same war that almost killed 17 children who didn't have any say in whether their parents' generation chose violence over dialogue. Marcus's voice was firm but not harsh. You didn't pull the trigger. Neither did I, until they came through that door trying to kill us both. The blood is on the hands of whoever decided this war was worth fighting in the first place. Valira studied him for a long moment. You don't blame yourself for any of it, do you? The deaths. The violence. I blame myself for every missed shot, every second of hesitation, every time I could have been faster or smarter or better prepared. Marcus secured his sidearm and picked up his rifle, checking the receiver for damage. But the act of fighting itself? No, ma'am. Someone pointed Krell warriors at human and Ethorian civilians. Someone gave orders that made this bunker necessary. Those people carry the blame. I just carry the consequences. And the children? The shuttle? That's different. Marcus finished his weapons check and moved to the bunker's secondary exit, scanning the corridor beyond. Clear. That wasn't consequences. That was choice. I chose to help because I could. Because standing by and calculating acceptable losses for kids who just wanted to live felt like becoming exactly the kind of monster this war has been creating on both sides. They moved through the corridors in silence after that, Marcus on point, Valira following at the proper interval. The compound was eerily quiet. Krell warriors stood at intersections, weapons lowered, watching them pass with eyes that held calculations Marcus couldn't read. None attacked. None even moved to block their path. Kessetha's ceasefire was holding, at least for now. Command had set up a temporary forward base in what used to be a medical facility. Marcus recognized Colonel Vance immediately, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in the same tight bun she'd worn for 20 years, her face carrying the kind of weathered calm that came from seeing too much combat and making too many hard calls. Captain Chin. Vance's voice was neutral, professional. Status report. Princess Valira is secure. Minor injuries only. We encountered a Krell assault force led by Brood Queen Kesseth. 19 hostiles down before the Queen called a ceasefire. She's proposing negotiations. Vance's eyebrow rose fractionally, the closest she ever came to showing surprise. Negotiations. With Kesseth, the same Brood Queen who personally led the assault on New Sarajevo that killed 4,000 colonists. Yes, ma'am. And you believe this is genuine? Marcus considered his answer carefully. In his experience, officers like Vance didn't want optimism or pessimism. They wanted accurate assessment. I believe Kesseth saw something that changed her tactical calculus. Whether that translates to genuine peace or just a temporary advantage-seeking maneuver, I can't say. But she had U.S. dead to rights and chose talking instead. That's worth exploring. Valira stepped forward. Colonel, I need immediate transport to the Imperial Palace. My father must hear about this directly from me before rumors and intelligence reports color the narrative. Your Highness, with respect, the situation is still highly unstable, which is precisely why I need to move quickly. Valira's color shifted to something that looked almost like her father's, pure gold threaded with silver, the colors of imperial authority. Captain Chun will accompany me. He's a material witness to everything that happened. The Brood Queen specifically requested his testimony before her council. Vance looked at Marcus. Captain? Orders are to protect the princess, ma'am. If she's going to the palace, I'm going with her. You look like you've been through a plasma processor. When's the last time you slept? Marcus checked his chronometer. 37 hours ago. Medical? Burns are superficial. Armor took most of it. Stems are keeping me functional. Vance's mouth compressed into a thin line, the expression that meant she disapproved but wouldn't countermand. Fine. But, Chin, if this goes sideways, if Cassitha's playing some deeper game, you get the princess out first. Political consequences second to survival. Clear? Crystal, ma'am. The transport flight to the Imperial Palace took 4 hours. Marcus spent the first hour writing his after-action report, the second undergoing field treatment for his burns, and the third watching Valira rehearse what she was going to tell her father. She cycled through speeches, arguments, emotional appeals, and tactical presentations, her colors shifting with each approach until Marcus finally interrupted. Permission to speak freely, Your Highness? Granted. Stop preparing. Just tell him the truth. What happened? What you saw? What Kesset said? Emperors don't get moved by rhetoric. They get moved by facts that change the battlefield. Valira was quiet for a moment. Then, her color settled into a soft, steady blue. You're right. Thank you, Captain. The 4th hour Marcus spent in something close to meditation, a technique his first sergeant had taught him years ago. The body needed rest, but the mind needed silence more. He let the transport's vibrations ground him, let his breathing slow, let the constant tactical assessment that ran in the back of his consciousness finally quiet. When they landed, he was as ready as he'd ever be. The Imperial Palace was exactly as impressive as Marcus had expected and, somehow more. Crystal spires reached toward the sky like prayers made solid, each one refracting light in patterns that seemed to shift and flow. Valira led him through corridors that were simultaneously ancient and impossibly advanced, past guards, who looked at Marcus with barely concealed suspicion. Human soldiers weren't common this deep in Ethorian territory, especially not ones wearing combat armor marked with obvious battle damage. Emperor Thelvar received them in a chamber that was part throne room, part war room. Holographic displays showed fleet positions, territorial maps, casualty reports. The Emperor himself was massive for an Ethorian, easily 9 feet tall, his crystalline form shot through with veins of platinum that caught the light like trap stars. When he spoke, his voice resonated in frequencies Marcus felt in his chest. Valira translated without being asked, her colors subdued in her father's presence. He asks why his daughter brings a human soldier before him wearing weapons in the Imperial presence. Marcus had expected this. Protocol would demand he disarm, show submission, acknowledge the power differential. But Keseth had saluted him as an equal, and Valira had called him a witness, not a supplicant. He made a calculated choice. Because I'm not here as a petitioner, Your Majesty. I'm here as testimony. He kept his voice level, respectful but not obsequious. Your daughter survived because I did my job. A war might end because I did what my conscience demanded. And Brood Queen Keseth asked specifically that I speak before both councils about what happened in that bunker. If my weapons offend you, I'll secure them. But I won't pretend to be something I'm not. The silence stretched. Holographic displays flickered. Guards shifted, hands moving toward weapons. Valira's colors went through a rapid cascade that Marcus read as fear mixed with pride. Then Emperor Thelvar laughed. It was a sound like crystal bells, unexpected and genuine. He spoke at length, his colors shifting to patterns Marcus had never seen in any briefing. He says you are either the bravest human he's ever met or the most foolish. Valira translated, and her own colors were cycling towards something that looked like relief. And, since you kept his only daughter alive through an encounter that should have killed you both, he's inclined toward the former. He grants you the right to speak as an equal in this matter. Now tell him what happened. So Marcus did. He told the Emperor about the bunker, about the assault, about the 19 Krell who died before Kesseth arrived. He described the Queen's presence, her questions, her grief over the burned shuttle and the children he'd pulled from wreckage. He explained the ceasefire, the proposal, the salute. He left nothing out, including his own doubts and the tactical absurdity of one soldier's choice mattering enough to stop a war. When he finished, Thelvar stood silent. The holographic displays continued their slow rotation, showing a galaxy still on fire. Then the Emperor spoke, and this time his words came through the room's translation system in perfect galactic standard. For 4 years, I have fought to find an honorable end to this war. For 4 years, the Krell have met every overture with violence, every proposal with rejection. I began to believe that honor itself was a casualty of this conflict, that we had fought so long we'd forgotten why civilizations choose peace. He looked at Marcus, and those ancient crystalline eyes held something that might have been hope. You, Captain Chen, have given me what all my diplomats and generals could not. You've given me proof that some things matter more than victory. If a human soldier risks his life for alien children during a battle he could ignore, then perhaps we have not lost ourselves entirely in this darkness. The Emperor turned to the holographic displays. With a gesture, he brought up communication channels, fleet commanders, political advisors. I'm calling an emergency council session. Captain Chen will testify before the full Imperial Council. And I'm sending a message to Brood Queen Kesseth. Tell her I accept her proposal for negotiations. Tell her the human will speak to both our peoples about what he's seen. And tell her that Emperor Thelvar of Ethoria acknowledges her courage in seeking peace when vengeance would be easier. Marcus felt the weight of it settling over him like gravity increasing. He'd been a soldier for 12 years. He'd fought in 16 major engagements, protected 3 high-value targets, earned medals he never wore. But he'd never been asked to speak before councils, to represent anything larger than his own actions. The idea that his words might shape peace treaties, and end a war that had killed tens of thousands felt simultaneously too important and too fragile. Valira touched his arm, her colors warm and reassuring. You'll do well, Captain. You did the hard part already. Now you just have to tell people about it. With respect, Your Highness, I'm better at doing than talking about doing. Then talk the way you fight. With honesty and precision. She smiled, and for a moment she looked less like a princess and more like someone who had survived a battle and found something worth believing in on the other side. Tell them about 17 children. About a choice that didn't make tactical sense but made every kind of human sense. Let them see what Kesseth saw. The council session was scheduled for the following morning, which gave Marcus exactly 8 hours to rest, follow his official report, and try not to think about the fact that he was about to address the most powerful political body in the Ethorian Empire. He spent 6 of those hours sleeping in the quarters they'd assigned him, dreamless sleep that his body demanded and his training allowed. The 7th hour he spent reviewing recordings of the bunker incident, watching his own actions with the clinical detachment of someone analyzing combat footage. The 8th hour he spent simply sitting, breathing, preparing himself for the kind of battle that didn't involve weapons. The Imperial Council chamber held 300 representatives from across the Ethorian Empire, each one dressed in formal regalia that caught the light in dizzying patterns. Marcus stood in the center, still wearing his combat armor because someone had decided it would be more effective testimony than any ceremonial uniform. Let them see the scorch marks. Let them see proof of what he'd survived. Emperor Thelvar introduced him formally, explaining the circumstances, outlining the proposal from Kesseth. Then he turned the chamber over to Marcus. I'm not a diplomat, Marcus began. His voice echoed in the vast space, amplified by systems he didn't understand. I'm not a politician or a negotiator. I'm a soldier. My job is simple: protect my assigned principal, complete my mission, come home alive if possible. That's what I was doing 3 days ago when Princess Valira's convoy came under attack. He walked them through it. The assault. The bunker. The sound of Krell warriors dying because they'd made the tactical error of coming through a choke point against someone who trained for exactly that scenario. He described Kessetha's arrival, the cold that seemed to follow her, the intelligence in her eyes. She asked me why I ran toward that burning shuttle. Wanted to know what made me calculate that 17 children were worth one soldier's life. Marcus paused, looking across the chamber at representatives who'd never held a weapon, never made life or death choices measured in heartbeats. I told her the truth. I didn't calculate. Calculation was what let the shuttle get hit in the first place, because someone decided evacuation routes were an acceptable risk. Calculation was what would have let those children die, because the tactical value of one more soldier outweighed 17 unprotected civilians. He pulled up the holophile he'd prepared, showing the faces of the children he'd saved. A Centauri girl. 2 human boys. 4 Ethorian juveniles. 3 Krell hatchlings. Yes, Krell, children of the enemy, because the shuttle had been carrying refugees from a mixed colony. 5 other species Marcus didn't even recognize, all of them small and terrified and bleeding. I stopped calculating and started caring. And that's what Brood Queen Kesset saw. She saw someone from a species she'd been taught to hate, someone who should have been her enemy, choose compassion when violence would have been easier. She saw proof that maybe this war hasn't turned all of us into monsters yet. Marcus let that hang in the silence. She's offering you the same choice I made. Stop calculating acceptable losses and start caring about ending this before there's nothing left worth protecting. I can't tell you what decision to make, but I can tell you what I saw in that bunker. I saw an enemy warrior recognize honor. And I think that's worth something. The chamber erupted. Not in applause or condemnation, but in debate, immediate and fierce. Representatives argued protocol, questioned motives, demanded strategic analysis. Marcus stood in the center of it, silent, while Valira appeared at his side, her color steady and supportive. Emperor Thelvar let them argue for exactly 5 minutes. Then he raised a hand, and the chamber fell silent with a speed that spoke of deeply ingrained authority. Captain Chen has shown us what we've forgotten, the Emperor said. That honor isn't a tactical advantage. That compassion isn't weakness. That sometimes the most strategic thing we can do is remember we're more than our capacity for violence. He looked around the chamber. I'm accepting Brood Queen Kessetha's proposal. We will negotiate. We will listen. And if this human soldier can risk everything for children who weren't his responsibility, then we can risk our pride for a chance at peace. Council is dismissed. Prepare for diplomatic talks. Marcus exhaled slowly. Behind him, Valira's hand found his shoulder again, her touch light but grounding. You did it, she whispered. We'll see, Marcus replied. Talk is easy. Peace is hard. But 3 days later, when Brood Queen Kessetha arrived at the neutral station for the first formal negotiations in 4 years, she saluted Marcus first before acknowledging the Emperor. And when the talks began, when both sides sat across from each other with weapons secured and translators active, Marcus Chen stood witness to the thing he'd sparked with 17 children and one impossible choice. The war didn't end that day. Peace was never that simple. But it began to end, slowly, through conversations and compromises and both sides remembering that they'd once known how to be more than enemies. And sometimes, in the quiet moments between negotiations, Kessetha would catch Marcus's eye and her bioluminescent veins would pulse in patterns that looked almost like gratitude. Because he'd shown her something she'd forgotten, that the strongest armor wasn't scales or steel, but the stubborn human insistence on caring even when caring made no tactical sense at all. Marcus never considered himself a hero. Heroes made grand speeches and changed history through singular acts of courage. He was just a soldier who'd made a call, pulled some children from fire, and stood his ground when running would have been smarter. But when the first peace treaty was signed 6 months later, Princess Valera insisted he stand beside her father during the ceremony. And when Brood Queen Kesseth pressed her fist to her chest in that Krell salute, acknowledging the treaty and everything it represented, Marcus understood finally what he'd really done in that bunker. He hadn't stopped a war with violence. He'd stopped it by refusing to let violence be the only answer. And, in a galaxy that had forgotten how to choose anything else, that simple human stubbornness had been exactly revolutionary enough. 3/3